Alright, so it's been a while since I made a video on this channel, though I wanted to talk about one of my favorite lenses that I attached to my Canon DSLR camera. And that lens is the Sigma 35mm f1.4. And I love this lens so much that I'm actually going to be giving it away. I gotta let it go. What's up YouTube? My name is Kofi, but I'm also known as Cam Kodak, a portrait photographer. So today we're going to be talking about the Sigma 35mm f1.4 and why a lot of people swear by the 35mm focal length, and one of the reasons why I even picked it up in the first place. Now, the main reason why I even picked it up is because I was really shooting with the Nifty 50, and I noticed that the Nifty 50 on a crop sensor camera was very nice to start to get myself to increase my photography and my skill set within my photography, but I know that I needed something else. And having a 50mm that was a prime, I know that I fell in love with primes and I needed another prime. I wasn't really into zooms at the time, and the previous zoom that I had was the 10 to 18mm, which I think had like a variable aperture of like f4 to like 5.6, and basically it wasn't that great. Though I know that I really like primes. I really like how they have a fast aperture, f1.8, f1.4, something along those sorts. And I wanted something that was either a little bit wider or a little bit tighter than 50mm. Now, I did pick up the 85mm f1.8, and that lens is so dang beautiful for portraits that it would be really hard for me to let it go. But before I even picked up the 85mm, I definitely picked up the 35mm. And a lot of people would probably say, oh, why didn't you get the Canon 35mm f1.4? And the reason is the Sigma does everything that the 35mm from Canon does, but probably with $500 at least less of a price tag. So it seemed like a no-brainer to pick up the 35mm. So yeah. There's not much of a difference between the 35mm from Sigma and the 35mm from Canon, though I definitely saved a lot of money picking this one up, and it hasn't really failed me once. But talking about failures and whatnot, I'm going to be talking about the specs of this lens, what I like, what I don't like, and what I will be doing in the future. So let's get into it. Let's get into specs. The 35mm from Sigma is a prime lens that has an aperture that stops down to 1.4, and with that 1.4 aperture, it has 9 rounded aperture blades that creates beautiful bokeh balls when you're taking photos. And this lens comes within different mounts. We have the Canon EF mount, which I have right here, the Sony E mount, and also the Nikon F mount. Though if you do want to adapt this lens onto different camera mounts, they do offer a MC11 adapter from Sigma that you can adapt it to other camera mounts. And it works both well within photo and video. You probably clicked this video trying to figure out what this lens is mainly for, and I believe it truly masters in photography. If you're someone who takes a lot of photos of people, couples, or just portraits in general, I highly recommend getting a lens like this, because with the aperture of 1.4, it really just separates the background. Next topic is going to be what I like about this lens. So this lens, as I said before, is a 1.4 aperture. And if you are someone who considers yourself to be a portrait photographer, I highly recommend this lens if you're trying to truly separate your person, subject, or whatever you're taking a picture of from the background, because it truly creates a beautiful background and beautiful separation. And if you're someone who likes bokeh balls within your background, this lens is a no-brainer. Though I will admit, maybe you should bump it down a little to 2.8, and if you truly do not want to miss focus, definitely bring it down to 2.8 and you will still achieve a beautiful blurry background that still separates your subjects. And another thing that I like is that this lens can be found on the used market for around $400 to $600, and it truly would not make sense to be going for the brand name, let's say Canon 35mm f1.4. I'm only mentioning Canon because I mainly shoot with Canon, though it just doesn't make sense to go for a brand name camera when you could literally go for a third party that performs pretty much the same. So yeah, if you're interested in this lens, go get it. What I don't like about the 35mm. Now, I did mention before that I shoot on Canon, and I do shoot on a Canon crop sensor camera. And this lens is actually made for full frame cameras, but you would think that since it is a crop sensor, it shouldn't really have that many issues. But I was wrong, especially when shooting at the aperture of 1.4. And if you guys don't know about aperture is basically what creates that separation within your photos. It really makes your subject pop, especially within portrait photography. Though, when it comes to using this Sigma f1.4 at f1.4, it actually creates a lot of autofocus issues when it comes to a crop sensor camera. And it really didn't make sense to me, because for a full frame camera, it should make sense that on a full frame, it's a lot harder to focus. Though since we're on a crop sensor and we're cropped into the image, it should be easier for the 1.4 to be able to catch focus, because technically speaking, you're zooming in. But in this case, it doesn't. It still hunts for your subject. And if you truly want to use this lens all the time at f1.4, I believe you really gotta slow down when taking photos. Though that may not be the case for each and every scenario if you have this lens. And if you are someone who usually has events that can sometimes be fast-paced, this lens at f1.4 may not be the best option. So it kind of was a downgrade for me when I bought this lens for my crop sensor, thinking that I will be able to use the full capabilities of the f1.4. But if you are willing to stop down to a 2.8 aperture, which really isn't bad at all. I don't understand why a lot of people think that 2.8 is such a bad thing to do, but stopping down your lenses actually creates more clarity. It makes sure that your photos actually come in focus a lot more than always stopping down, and you still create a very blurry background regardless. And I believe that the photos that you will be sharing to your clients will still have them very happy with the end result. So definitely stopping down to 2.8 is a great thing to do, even stopping down at f4. But it truly does take the value out of this lens, knowing that you bought it for the f1.4 aperture, and it doesn't always work when you have a crop sensor camera. Now, the fact that I mentioned that I have a crop sensor camera led me to venture out to other lenses that I thought would probably be best suited for most of my needs. And while I love using prime lenses, I know I need to get something to replace this, especially if I'm going to be going wider. And I picked up something else, which was the Sigma 18 to 35 f1.8. And that lens is specifically made for crop sensor cameras. Now, it does leave a sour taste in my mouth, knowing that I don't pick this lens up as much as I used to, but I just had to face the facts, and the Sigma 18 to 35 f1.8 truly allows me to shoot at f1.8 with minimal focus hunting, and it truly just gets it shot each and every time. And I love stopping down that lens to f2, f2.8, even f4, especially when I'm taking pictures of other things than just people. And when it comes to fast-paced environments, let's say birthday shoots or any other type of event photography, wedding photography, it just makes it a whole lot easier to have that range of 18 to 35. I can go on the wide end to capture not only someone really up close, but also show people the environment that they're in. And I can still go to 35, which is probably like a 50 millimeter equivalent on a crop sensor. And it still allows me to have that separation and bring a lot of emotion within someone's face when taking their photos. So the 18 to 35 was just a better option for me. Even though it is a zoom lens, it still captures photos at f1.8, still has a beautiful separation, still has beautiful bokeh within the background, and truly has minimal hunting when it comes to autofocus. It nails its autofocus a whole lot more than the Sigma 35 at f1.4 for a crop sensor camera. So yeah, it just made more sense to pick up the 18 to 35 over the 35. And that's the reason why I have to let this lens go. I just can't justify having this lens sit on my shelf the whole dang time when I know that I'm neglecting it while it's being replaced by its technically bigger brother, 18 to 35. And I truly don't want to be a hoarder who just holds onto a lens while it's collecting dust. So I truly believe I should be letting this lens go and give it to someone else who may be able to use it a whole lot more than me. Plus, I don't want a lens to stop my creativity. If anything, I want it to continue to help others create amazing photos and videos. Apart from that, thank you for watching this 35mm lens video. You could have stopped anywhere to watch anyone else's video, but you stopped here to watch mine. And I just want to say thank you for doing that. It means a lot. And I just hope you have a great day. Thank you. Love you. Goodbye.